Idle No More started in November 2012 as a protest against Bill C-45, or the Jobs and Growth Act, created by Stephen Harper's conservative government. Activists argued that this act diminished the basic rights and the sovereignty of Indigenous communities. It increased governmental projects without Indigenous involvement on environmental protection or other assessments on their lands. The goal is to peacefully enforce and honor Indigenous sovereignty and to protect the land, water, and sky. It is a nationwide wave that forever changed what Canadians thought they knew about Indigenous peoples. Sadly, the issues represented in Idle No More are not new, for both in the past and the present, as the effects of colonization continue to attack Indigenous peoples' rights, damages their culture, and their relations to the land. This movement is only a small chapter in a bigger story. Oki, Dananastra, Abawatcht, Tansi, Tanashi, Bonjour, hello. We honor and acknowledge this land, knowing that we are still learning and our words will be imperfect. We strive to listen and to learn. We honor and acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Treaty 7 nations, including the Siksika-Zapi, comprised of the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, and the Amastapi-Piikani nations. We acknowledge the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Nakota Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney Nations, the Métis Nation within Alberta, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Idle No More was founded by 4 women from Saskatchewan: Sylvia McAdam, Jessica Gordon, Nina Wilson, and Sheila McLean. A Facebook page titled Idle No More was formed after an exchange of emails between these 4 women regarding the issues that they had with Bill C-45. This kick-started a conversation and a movement to discuss a matter of environmental protection and Indigenous sovereignty. As they started to question what was really going on in the bill, they decided that by reading the whole law page by page was going to help understand and shed light on what was exactly happening. Soon, they took to social media for help, to decipher the bill and ask for legal advice. These 4 women decided to get off their butts and quite literally, idle no more. Jessica Gordon named the page because of her impatience. She was not going to waste any more time getting the voice about this issue to the public. Social media quickly became a means of mobilization and a way to get their message out. The Jobs and Growth Act, or Bill C-45, is an omnibus bill, a bill that combines diverse subjects into a single package to be passed by one simple vote through the legislature. The goal of this bill is to supposedly benefit all Canadians by creating more jobs and opportunities for economic growth. Bill C-45 made minor adjustments to multiple acts or laws by putting them all together and creating an idealized label that will make people not consider the small, impactful changes that may occur. The most significant change regarding the movement of Idle No More was the amendments to the Indian Act and the Navigable Waters Act. The changes to the Indian Act included a change to the way that band governments got rights to lease out their own lands. As the Canadian government made changes, it resulted in the loss of Indigenous sovereignty because it lowered the threshold for Indigenous communities to give up their land. Let's say that a minister from the Canadian government called a meeting because they wanted to create a governmental project on a reserve. They would call a meeting, and whoever shows up, does not matter who they are. Even if it's only 3 people and 2 of them vote in favor, then the land would automatically be taken away. As for the Navigable Waters Act, this act prohibits activities that could interfere with the protection of Canada's water, which is very sacred to Indigenous teachings. Bill C-45 amended the original act so that it only pertains to the navigation and no longer considers environmental protection. Lakes and rivers are only now protected if they are considered important commercial and recreational waterways. The government's intentions by hiding all this in an omnibus bill with no reflection or consideration by the people who are going to be directly impacted is so that the general population wouldn't be able to question what was really going on and being changed around. Idle No More was different than any other past movements because it was a nationwide thing that was unified and brought people together in a very general way. It had a very large urban presence that brought more Indigenous and non-Indigenous people together than in the past few decades. On November 19, 2012, Nina Wilson organized the first rally against Bill C-45 in Winnipeg that contained just 4 people. But even with this small presence, this small protest eventually led to thousands more. On December 4, 2012, a handful of chiefs from First Nations all over Canada brought their concerns to the House of Commons, where their goal was to address their concerns to the Prime Minister and talk leader to leader. This action took media reporters by surprise, as they were not going to expect Indigenous leadership to be as vocal about their concerns about Indigenous sovereignty. This one act goes viral, but it's not enough to keep the topic of Idle No More in the headlines for very long. With Indigenous leaders now in the spotlight, other governmental leaders are now being forced to be more aware and are going to be held more accountable by the public for addressing these issues. Now that the general population has become more and more aware about Idle No More, people have started to gather in numbers. On December 10th, a national stage is set, as rallies all across the country are held. People are not just gathering in more traditional protesting ways. People are gathering in places like malls to round dance peacefully, and are setting up blockades in and around Indigenous communities. One of the most important protesters was Chief Teresa Spence. A year before Bill C-45 was announced, her community issued a state of emergency because of extreme poverty and lack of housing. Overall, Spence was unhappy with Ottawa's responses to helping her community members. On December 11, 2012, she stopped eating for 1 month. Her goal in this hunger strike was to have the federal government finally recognize treaty rights and have the Governor General and the Prime Minister meet with Indigenous leadership. She put her life on the line while encouraging others in solidarity and support. Her hunger strike created a focus point for the spread of the movement, and suddenly there was an immense time frame for Harper's government to step up. This pushed Aboriginal issues into the headlines for almost every day after her hunger strike began. The use of social media in this movement reflects the Indigenous ability to adapt. The quote, "The revolution will not be televised, but it will be tweeted," goes to show how even if big media outlets are not going to listen to how important this is, people are still going to gather and share. Clearly, the media had another agenda when this monkey, found roaming around a Toronto IKEA, dressed in a fur coat, took control over the headlines for weeks. Indigenous peoples created their own media because of people in power not going to listen, then Indigenous people are still going to organize and connect. Interpersonal relationships were created because of Idle No More, as it created a space of community involvement to people who normally don't step out and voice their concerns. Having a big community involvement like this in a legislational issue means that it could be anyone and everyone who can voice their support. All ages, all genders, cultures, or religions can lead the change. Idle No More created a welcoming, supportive, peaceful, and safe place to come and express in an important discussion. Idle No More also gave a voice to Indigenous women and youth, who mostly don't have a say in legislation and politics. The 4 founders of Idle No More were women, and it gave empowerment to Indigenous women and youth about leadership and speaking up against the sexism built into Western colonial leadership. The ideals of liberalism play a role in Idle No More because of the freedoms, liberties, sovereignty, and ideologies of Indigenous people are being directly challenged. And as a collective, the Canadian population is showing and valuing their support for Indigenous people because of the oppression imposed by the Canadian government. This bringing together of all people also created the concern that if Indigenous people are being treated poorly, who's next on the government's list? This is not just an Indigenous issue. The land we live on is shared by all of us, and we must all protect it. If we allow the government to walk all over us and take away the protection of the land, water, and sky, what is the next thing to fall?